The Wyoming wind carried more than dust that morning. It carried the weight of Elias Boone's decision as he stood on the platform of the Cheyenne Depot, watching the Union Pacific locomotive wheeze to a stop. Steam hissed against the October cold, and passengers began stepping down, their eastern clothes marking them as foreigners to this harsh land. Elias shifted his weight, his 6'4" frame casting a long shadow across the weathered boards. At 36, he'd built his ranch from nothing but sweat and stubborn will, turning 600 acres of wild grassland into one of the most productive spreads in the territory. But success meant little when you ate supper alone every night, when the only voices in your house were echoes of your own. He touched the folded letter in his vest pocket. Her last correspondence. Clara Dempsey, a widow from Missouri who'd answered his advertisement with practical questions about water sources and winter preparations rather than romantic notions. That had caught his attention more than any flowery prose could have. The crowd thinned, and then he saw her. She wasn't what the town gossips would call a beauty, not with that determined set to her jaw and the way she gripped her worn carpetbag like it held everything she owned, which it probably did. But there was steel in her spine as she scanned the platform, and when her eyes found his, she didn't look away. "Mr. Boone?" Her voice carried clear despite the wind. "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat. "Mrs. Dempsey?" "Just Clara will do." She studied him with the same frank assessment he'd give a horse at auction. "You're taller than I expected. You're exactly as I expected." The words came out before he could stop them, but they were true. Her letters had painted a picture of someone who faced facts head-on, and here she stood, travel-dusty and tired but unashamed of either. "Well then," a ghost of a smile touched her lips, "I suppose we should get on with it." The ride to town proper took 20 minutes. Clara sat beside him on the wagon seat, her back straight despite what must have been days of train travel. She didn't fill the silence with chatter, another point in her favor. When she did speak, it was to ask about the creek they crossed and whether it ran year-round. "Even in drought years," Elias confirmed, "spring-fed from the mountains." "Good. Water's life out here." He glanced at her sidelong. Most women from back east worried about churches and society. Clara worried about water rights. "You know something about ranching?" "I know about surviving." Her hands, he noticed, bore old calluses beneath the travel dirt. "My late husband had a small farm. When the fever took him and our boy, I kept it running 2 years before the bank took it." The matter-of-fact way she mentioned losing both husband and child told him more than tears would have. This wasn't a woman who dwelt on sorrow. She shouldered it and moved forward. The church sat at the town's edge, small and whitewashed, with a graveyard that held more stories than the library ever would. Reverend Morrison waited inside, his wife serving as witness. The ceremony would be simple as a handshake, which suited them both. "You sure about this?" Elias asked as they stood before the church door. "Last chance to catch the evening train back east." Clara turned to face him fully. "Mr. Boone, I've been sure since I read your advertisement. You didn't promise me roses and poetry. You promised honest work and a real life. That's worth more than pretty words." "Even the part about 10 sons?" "Even that." This time her smile was fuller, though we might have to negotiate on the exact number. Inside, the Reverend cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved." "Reverend," Elias interrupted, "we'd appreciate the practical version." Morrison's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "Very well. Elias Boone, do you take this woman as your lawful wife?" "I do." "Clara Dempsey, do you take this man as your lawful husband?" "I do." "The rings?" Elias pulled out a simple gold band. Nothing fancy, but solid and true. Clara's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected even that much. Her hand was steady as he slipped it on. "I, by the power vested in me, you're married. You may kiss your bride." Elias hesitated. They'd conducted this like a business arrangement, and he didn't want to presume. But Clara stepped closer, tilting her face up with the same practical directness she'd shown all day. The kiss was brief, a seal on a contract, but her lips were warmer than he'd expected. Outside, the sun sat low on the horizon, painting the grasslands gold and purple. Tomorrow would bring the real test, introducing Clara to ranch life, to the dozen hands who'd work alongside her, to the demanding rhythm of cattle and seasons. But for now, they had this moment of possibility. "The ranch is an hour's ride," Elias said, helping her back onto the wagon. "We'll be there before full dark." "Tell me about it." Clara settled her skirts with efficient movements. "The real truth, not what you think I want to hear." So he did. He told her about the main house his father had built, sturdy but plain, about the bunkhouse that needed repairs before winter, about the cattle, 800 head of longhorns mixed with newer stock he was trying to improve the bloodline with, about the vegetable garden his mother had started, now gone to seed and wildness. "I can work with that," Clara said when he finished. "A garden wants tending, same as anything else." The road curved through a stand of cottonwoods, their leaves rattling gold in the evening breeze. A jackrabbit burst from the brush, making the horses shy. "Easy now," Clara murmured, and Elias realized she was talking to the horses, not him. She had the touch, another thing that couldn't be taught. "Why did you really answer my advertisement?" he asked as they climbed the last hill before the ranch came into view. "A woman like you could have found a dozen men back east. Men back east want ornaments for their parlors." Clara's voice carried an edge of old bitterness. "After Thomas died, I had offers. Men who saw a young widow as either tragedy to be pitied or opportunity to be seized. None who saw me as myself. And what did you see in my letter?" She was quiet long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, honesty. "You wrote I need a strong woman and 10 sons. Not I seek a gentle companion or a rose for my garden. You knew what you wanted and weren't ashamed to say it plain. Some would call it crude. Some would be wrong." She turned to look at him, the setting sun catching gold flecks in her brown eyes. "I've had pretty words. Mr. Boone. They don't keep you warm when the winter wind blows through the walls. They don't put food on the table when the crops fail. Give me crude honesty over pretty lies any day." The ranch spread before them as they crested the hill. The main house with its wide porch. The barn and corrals. The bunkhouse sending up smoke from its chimney. Home. Or what passed for it. "It's not much," Elias began, but Clara cut him off. "It's solid. That's what matters." She studied the lay of the land with a practical eye. Good drainage for the house site, barns positioned right for the wind. Someone knew what they were doing. "My father came out here in '59 right after the gold played out. Said there was more wealth in grass and cattle than in all the gold men killed each other for. Smart man. He was." Elias guided the team down the track toward home. "Died 3 winters back. Mother went the year before. Just me and the land since then. The ranch dogs came running, 3 mongrels with more enthusiasm than sense." Clara held out her hand, let them sniff and approve before scratching behind their ears. "What are their names?" "Never named them." He felt oddly embarrassed by the admission. Seemed foolish, talking to dogs. "Everything needs a name," Clara said firmly. "How else do you tell them apart when you're calling them?" By the time they reached the house, she'd christened them Scout, Badger, and Molly, and all three were following her like she'd raised them from pups. The house stood 2 stories, built from logs and stones pulled from the creek. Nothing fancy, but the walls were thick and the roof was sound. Elias had added glass windows 2 years back, a luxury that still made him feel slightly guilty. "Running water?" Clara asked, noting the pump by the kitchen door. "Piped from the spring, the gravity-fed. Won't freeze if we keep the pipes wrapped." "Indoor necessary?" "Not yet. Outhouses past the garden." She nodded, making mental notes. "Cellar?" "A root cellar under the kitchen. Stays cool even in summer." "You good?" She climbed down from the wagon without waiting for his help. "Show me the kitchen first. That'll tell me what I need to know." The kitchen sprawled across the back of the house, dominated by a massive iron stove that could heat the whole first floor. Pots and pans hung from hooks, scoured clean but showing their age. The table could seat 12, built for a crew at harvest time. Clara ran her hands over the surfaces, checking for cleanliness and order. "You've kept it well. Mrs. Henderson from town comes out twice a month, does washing and heavy cleaning. She can keep coming if she wants. I'll not turn away willing hands." Clara opened cupboards, taking inventory. "But daily cooking's mine. Can't run a ranch on restaurant food." "You'll be cooking for the hands, too. At least breakfast and supper. They fend for themselves at noon. It's a lot of work." "Mr. Boone." She turned to face him. "Elias, I didn't come here expecting leisure. I came to work, to build something. Stop warning me about hardship like I might faint at the thought." He held up his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. Now." She untied her bonnet, revealing hair the color of dark honey pinned in a practical bun. "Show me the rest, then I'll see what can be done about supper. I'm guessing those hands of yours are used to eating about now?" "Another hour. Sun's not full down yet. Then we'd best get moving." He showed her through the house, the front parlor they never used, the dining room for Sunday dinners that never happened, the 3 bedrooms upstairs. His room was Spartan as a monk's cell. The other 2 stood empty, waiting for the family that would fill them. Clara paused in the doorway of the largest empty room. This would make a good nursery. The words hung between them, acknowledging what hadn't been said outright. This wasn't just about companionship or keeping house. He'd been clear in his advertisement, and she'd agreed to it all. "When the time come," he said carefully. "When the time comes." She moved on to inspect the linen closet, practical as ever. "But first things first. A ranch this size needs feeding, and from what I can see, you've been living on beef and beans." "Be nothing wrong with beef and beans. Nothing right with them every night either." She headed back downstairs with the air of a general planning a campaign. "I saw flour and lard in the pantry. Still time to get biscuits made if I hurry. You better warn your men there's a woman in the kitchen. Don't want anyone walking in unprepared." Elias found himself smiling as he headed for the door. "I'll warn them." "And Elias?" she called after him. "That business about 10 sons, we'll start with getting through harvest, then see what the good Lord provides. Fair enough?" "Fair enough." The evening air was crisp as he walked toward the bunkhouse. Behind him, lamplight bloomed in the kitchen windows, warm and welcoming in a way they hadn't been for years. He could hear Clara moving about, the clatter of pans and slam of the oven door. Maybe this would work after all. Maybe crude honesty was better than pretty words. Maybe a strong woman was exactly what this ranch, what he, needed. Time would tell. It always did out here, where the land stripped away pretense and left only what was real and true. But for the first time in 3 years, Elias Boone walked toward the bunkhouse with something that felt dangerously like hope. The ranch hands gathered in the dining room like schoolboys called before the headmaster, hats in hand and boots scuffed clean on the porch boards. Clara surveyed them from the kitchen doorway, flour still dusting her apron from the biscuits browning in the oven. "Oh, boys," Elias began, then cleared his throat. "Men, this is Mrs. Boone, my wife." The words still felt foreign on his tongue, but Clara stepped forward without hesitation, wiping her hands on her apron before extending one to the foreman. "Hey, Jim Garrett, ma'am." The weathered cowhand took her hand carefully, as if afraid he might break it. "Pleased to meet you." "Mr. Garrett," Clara's handshake was firm. "Elias tells me you've been running things here near on 10 years. "Yes, ma'am. Since I was just past green myself." She moved down the line, learning names and faces. Tom Brennan, the horse wrangler with gentle eyes. The Kowalski brothers, Polish immigrants who spoke better to cattle than people. Young Billy Chen, whose father had built half the railroad before settling in Cheyenne. Miguel Santos, who could read the weather in cloud shapes. Each man straightened under her direct gaze, seeing something in her that demanded respect without asking for it. "Supper's in 20 minutes, Clara announced when the introductions were done. "I'll ring the bell. And gentlemen, I run a clean kitchen, hands and faces washed, or you don't eat." A few of the younger hands grinned, but Jim Garrett nodded seriously. "Yes, ma'am. We'll mind our manners." As the men filed out, Elias lingered. "You handled that well. I've managed farm crews before." Clara checked her biscuits, nodding at their golden tops. "Hungry men are the same everywhere. Feed them well, treat them fair, and they'll work themselves to bone for you." "That simple?" "Most things are, when you strip away the nonsense." She pulled the biscuits out, their scent filling the kitchen like a benediction. "Now make yourself useful and slice that beef. Thin as you can manage. I need to stretch it to feed everyone proper." They worked side by side in comfortable efficiency. Clara had found his mother's good platter, the one they used for Christmas, and arranged the meat with an eye for presentation that surprised him. "Just because we're practical doesn't mean we can't have beauty," she said, catching his look. "Man appreciates his food more when it's served with care." The meal was simple: beef, biscuits, gravy, and canned peaches she'd discovered in the pantry. But the men ate like it was Sunday dinner. Clara moved between table and kitchen, keeping platters full and coffee hot, deflecting compliments with the ease of long practice. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Tom Brennan asked, helping himself to his fourth biscuit. "Necessity." Clara refilled his cup. "When you've got nothing but cornmeal and hope, you learn to make it taste like something." After the hands returned to the bunkhouse, Elias helped clear the table. The domesticity of it felt strange but not unpleasant, like trying on new boots that would eventually mold to fit. "I need to ask you something," Clara said, washing dishes with the same focused energy she brought to everything. "About sleeping arrangements." He'd been dreading this. "I thought, that is, I prepared the front bedroom for you, until we know each other better." "Sensible." If she was relieved or disappointed, her tone gave nothing away. "But I'll need to move some things. That room faces east. I'll be up with the sun anyway. Better to put me where I won't wake you when I start the stoves." "You could take my room. I don't mind moving." "No." She handed him a plate to dry. "A man needs his space kept his way. I'll make do fine." They finished the dishes in silence, but it was companionable rather than awkward. Outside, a coyote called across the distance, answered by another. "A first night in a new place is always strange," Elias offered as Clara hung up her apron. "I've had stranger." She touched the wedding ring, still new on her finger. "At least here I know what's expected, and that's more than most brides get." He walked her to the stairs, lamp in hand. Breakfast is at 5, earlier during branding or harvest. I'll be up at 4. She took the lamp. Bread needs time to rise. And Elias? Thank you. For the ring. I didn't expect it. Every wife should have a ring. Not every wife gets one. She climbed the stairs, lamplight throwing her shadow long on the wall. Good night. Good night, Clara. He stood at the bottom of the stairs until her door closed, then made his own way up. His room felt different knowing she was just down the hall, not smaller exactly, but less empty. Through the thin walls, he could hear her moving about, the creak of drawers opening, the rustle of fabric. Setting up house, he realized, making a nest in this strange new place. The thought should have worried him. Change always had before. Instead, he found himself thinking about breakfast, wondering if she'd make those biscuits again. The next days fell into rhythm faster than he'd expected. Clara rose before dawn, true to her word, and by the time he came downstairs, coffee was hot and breakfast well underway. She packed lunches for the men heading to distant pastures, mended what needed mending, and still found time to start clearing the garden. "A shame to let good land go to waste," she said when he found her wrestling with a tangle of old tomato vines. "Won't do much this late in the year, but I can at least prepare for spring. I could spare Tom to help you. He's good with growing things." "I'll manage." She yanked a stubborn root free. "Though I wouldn't turn down some manure from the horse stalls. Nothing better for building up tired soil." He watched her work, this woman he'd married but barely knew. 3 days in, and already the ranch felt different, cleaner, maybe, or just more alive. The men stood straighter, worked harder, came to meals with faces scrubbed. Even the dogs seemed happier, following Clara on her rounds like a furry honor guard. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Just thinking. A dangerous habit in a man." But she smiled as she said it. "Make yourself useful and fetch that wheelbarrow. This pile won't move itself." They worked together through the afternoon, clearing years of neglect from what had been his mother's pride. Clara asked questions about the ranch, the cattle, the men, filing away information with the same careful attention she gave to sorting seeds worth saving. "You miss her," Clara said suddenly, "and your mother." "Every day." He hadn't meant to admit it so readily. "She held this place together in ways I'm still discovering." "Tell me about her." So he did, sharing memories as they worked, his mother teaching him to read by lamplight, her battle with his father over sending him to school in town, the way she could gentle a spooked horse with just her voice. "She sounds like a strong woman," Clara said when he finished. "She had to be out here. And your father, was he a hard man?" Elias considered. "Fair. Expected a day's work for a day's pay from himself most of all. But he laughed too, especially when Mother made him. Said she was the only person who could find his funny bone. Important in a marriage, laughter." Clara straightened, pressing a hand to her back. "Easy to forget when times get hard. You laugh much before, She was quiet long enough he thought he'd overstepped. Then, "Thomas made me laugh, even at the end. When the fever had him talking nonsense, he'd find ways to make me smile. Said it was his job to keep the light in my eyes. Sounds like a good man." He was, she bent back to her work. "But good men die same as bad ones. Learned that young." The sun was slanting low when Jim Garrett came riding in fast, his horse lathered with sweat. "Hey, boss, we got trouble. Fence down in the north pasture. Looks like someone cut it deliberate." Elias was already moving toward the barn. "How many head loose?" "Maybe 30, 40. Tom and the boys are trying to round them up, But if they scatter into Gibson's land, I know. Gibson had been eyeing Elias's water rights for years, looking for any excuse to claim infringement. Saddle fresh horses. We'll need every hand. I'm coming, Clara said. Both men turned to stare at her. You ride? Elias asked. Hey, since I was 5 and you need every hand, you just said so. It's dangerous. Hey, so is cooking for 12 men who haven't eaten since dawn. She was already heading for the house. Give me 5 minutes to change. She was back in 4, wearing a split skirt that had seen better days and boots that looked older than she was. But she swung into the saddle Jim offered like she'd been born to it. They rode hard toward the break, the sun painting everything gold and red. Clara kept pace without complaint, her seat steady despite the rough ground. When they reached the damage, Elias bit back a curse. The fence hadn't just been cut, it had been systematically destroyed. Posts pulled up and wire tangled beyond quick repair. This is hours of work, Jim said grimly. Question is why. Elias studied the horizon. Gibson's got no reason to start trouble now. Unless he knows something we don't, Clara said quietly. She dismounted and was examining the wire. This is fresh cut. See how the ends shine? Done today? Maybe this morning? She was right, which meant whoever did this might still be around. Elias was about to suggest she head back when movement caught his eye. Cattle. A good 50 head, being driven east by riders who weren't his. Hey, mount up, he ordered. Jim, take Billy and Miguel, circle north, rest of you with me. Clara, I'm still coming. Her jaw set in that way he was learning meant no argument would move her. They swept down on the rustlers like judgment itself. 6 men. Professionals by the way they tried to scatter. But Elias's crew knew this land, knew every draw and gulch. Within minutes they had 4 pinned down, the other 2 racing for the territory line. Let them go, Elias called as Tom started after them. We got what matters. The captured men were surly but not talking. One kept eyeing Clara with speculation that made Elias's hand itch for his rifle. Take them to town, he told Jim. Let Sheriff Morton sort it out. We'll get these cattle home. I'll help with the cattle, Clara said. Well, you should go with Jim. Make sure the story gets told right. She was right again. In a frontier town, the first version of events often became the only version. But leaving her out here felt wrong, even with his men around. I'll be fine, she said, reading his hesitation. Wouldn't be the first time I've driven cattle. He believed her. This woman he'd known less than a week. And he believed her competence like he believed in Sunrise. Tom, you and Billy stay with Mrs. Boone. Rest of you with me. The ride to town took 2 hours. By the time they arrived, word had somehow spread, and half the town was waiting outside the sheriff's office. Morton, a cautious man who liked his job too much to risk it, took his time with statements. Funny thing, he said after the rustlers were locked up. Man came through yesterday asking about your spread, said he was looking to buy land, wanted to know who had the best water. What man? He didn't give a name, city-dressed, though, soft hands. Elias filed that away. Ranch troubles usually came from neighbors, not strangers. But these weren't usual times. The railroad was pushing west, bringing new money and new ideas about land use. It was full dark when he got home. Lamps burned in the kitchen, and the smell of stew drifted across the yard. Inside, he found Clara serving the hands, moving easy among them like she'd done it for years. A cattle all secure, Tom reported. Mrs. Day Boone had us drive them into the home pasture for tonight, said it was better to keep them close until that fence is fixed. Smart thinking. Elias caught Clara's eye, saw the pleased flush at the praise. After the men left, they sat at the kitchen table over coffee and pie. Clara had somehow found time to make. "You did well today," he said. "I did what needed doing." She cut him another slice. "That's what partners do. Partners, not husband and wife, not master and servant. Partners. That man Morton mentioned. You think he's connected?" "Maybe." Elias considered sharing his suspicions, decided on honesty. "Railroad's been buying up land north of here. Might be they're looking to expand. And your water rights would make this prime territory. You catch on quick. I've seen land grabs before." Her mouth tightened. "Back in Missouri before the war. Men with money and lawyers taking what generations built. Law's different out here, though. Some still favors the man with the most guns or the best connections. Then we'd better make sure we have both." She stood, started clearing plates. "I'll need to go to town tomorrow. If there's trouble coming, I want to know the women. They hear things men don't." You're taking to this fast." She paused at the sink. "Did you expect different? I came here to build a life, Elias. Can't do that by half measures." "No, I suppose not." He stood, suddenly awkward. "It's getting late." "Yes." She dried her hands slowly. "I suppose it is." They stood there, the kitchen warm around them, neither moving toward the stairs. Finally, Clara spoke. "Ask me again in a month." "What?" "About the sleeping arrangements. Ask me again in a month. For now, we're still strangers, whatever the law says. But we won't always be." The promise in those words sent something through him that wasn't quite relief, wasn't quite disappointment. A month, then. A month. She picked up the lamp. "Good night, Elias." Good night, Clara." He watched her climb the stairs again. But this time the distance between their doors didn't feel quite so far. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter was coming, bringing its own challenges. But for the first time in years, Elias looked forward to it. Winter meant long nights, close quarters. Time to learn the woman he'd married. Time to see if a partnership could become something more. The storm arrived without warning on a Tuesday night in early November. Clara woke to the house shuddering under the wind's assault, ice pellets striking the windows like buckshot. She lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar groans of timber and stone, then rose and wrapped her shawl tight. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Elias. He was fully dressed, boots already on. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. Temperatures dropping fast, and if the cattle are still in the north pasture, they'll freeze." She was already turning back to her room. "Give me 2 minutes." "Clara, no, this isn't a summer shower." 2 minutes, she repeated firmly. She dressed in layers, her heaviest wool dress, Thomas's old coat that she'd kept for sentiment but now appreciated for warmth, 2 pairs of stockings. When she emerged, Elias was waiting with an oilskin slicker. "Jim and the boys are saddling horses," he said, helping her into the slicker. "But I want you to understand that men die in storms like this." "Yes, I understand." She pulled on thick mittens. "I also understand that dead cattle mean no money come spring. This ranch is my life now, too." Something shifted in his expression. "Stay close. If we get separated, find shelter and wait. Don't try to be a hero. Same goes for you." They stepped out into a wall of white. The wind hit like a physical thing, driving ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Clara grabbed Elias's arm to steady herself, and they fought their way to the barn where the hands were preparing. "North pasture's a death trap in this," Jim shouted over the wind. "But there's 100 head up there. We can drive them to Carson's Draw," Tom suggested. It's sheltered and only half the distance back here. Elias nodded. Take rope, all we've got. We'll need to string guidelines. Billy, you and Miguel prep the barn for wounded stock. Clara, I'm riding. She was already moving toward the horses. The men exchanged glances, but Jim spoke up. She sits a horse better than half of us, boss. We need every hand. They rode out in a tight group, ropes linking their horses. The familiar landscape had vanished under driving snow and darkness. Only Jim's knowledge of every rise and hollow kept them moving in the right direction. 20 minutes out, they heard the cattle, a low, miserable sound that carried on the wind. The herd had bunched together for warmth, but ice was already forming on their hides. Circle them, Elias commanded. Push them toward the draw. It was brutal work. The cattle, stupid with cold and fear, wanted only to stand still and die. The horses fought every step, heads low against the wind. Clara's hands went numb inside her mittens, her face raw despite the scarf wrapped around it. A young heifer broke from the herd, stumbling toward a gulch that Clara knew meant death. Without thinking, she spurred her horse after it, rope already in motion. The loop settled clean around the heifer's neck, but the animal's weight nearly pulled Clara from the saddle. Then Elias was there, his rope joining hers. The two of them hauling the heifer back to safety. He gave her a look that might have been approval or anger, impossible to tell through the storm, before wheeling back to the herd. Inch by inch, they moved the cattle. Tom's horse went down, throwing him into a drift. He came up cursing but whole, swinging up behind one of the Kowalski brothers. They lost 3 steers to the gulch before Jim could string a rope barrier. Carson's draw appeared like salvation, a deep cut in the land where the wind couldn't reach. The cattle, sensing shelter, suddenly cooperated, pouring down the slope into safety. Count them, Elias ordered as the last stragglers stumbled in. A 94, Jim called back. Better than I hoped. There's a line shack near here, Elias told Clara. We'll warm up before heading back. The shack was barely big enough for all of them, but it had walls and a stove. Tom got a fire going while the others saw to the horses. Clara found herself pressed between Elias and the wall, sharing heat whether they wanted to or not. Your hands, he said suddenly, taking them in his. Her mittens had soaked through, leaving her fingers white with cold. They're fine, she started, but he was already rubbing them between his palms, bringing painful circulation back. Frostbite's no joke. His hands were gentle despite their size. Should have sent you back. Would you have gone back if Jim ordered it? A smile ghosted across his face. No. Then don't insult me by expecting different. The storm raged for 2 more hours before showing signs of breaking. They used the time to dry clothes and share the whiskey Jim had secreted in his saddlebags. To Mrs. Boone, Tom raised the bottle. Who rides like a man and ropes better than most? To survival, Clara countered, and to draws that shelter cattle. They made it back to the ranch as dawn was breaking, revealing a world transformed by ice and snow. The temperature was still falling, but the wind had died. Get some rest, Elias told the hands. We'll need to haul hay to that draw later. In the kitchen, Clara started coffee with hands that shook slightly. Elias noticed. A reaction, she said, happens after. You've done this before, ridden into storms. Different storms. She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Thomas and I got caught in a cyclone once. Spent 6 hours in a root cellar while it tore our barn apart above us. When we came out, the only thing left standing was the outhouse. Must have been terrifying. Yes, she sipped her coffee, but we rebuilt. That's what you do. They stood in comfortable silence, steam rising from their cups. Outside, the dogs ventured out, barking at this new white world. That heifer, Elias said finally. Good rope work. My father taught me. Said a woman alone needs skills that don't depend on strength. Smart man. He had his moments. She refilled their cups. Should sleep while we can. You said something about hauling hay later. Clara. He caught her arm as she turned away. Thank you. For riding out. For doing what needed doing? She smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. That's what partners do, remember? He released her arm slowly. I remember. She headed for the stairs, pausing at the bottom. Elias, that month I mentioned, we're a week into it. Then she was gone, leaving him to wonder what exactly she meant by that reminder. The next days brought a rhythm of survival, hauling hay to the sheltered cattle, breaking ice on water troughs, checking fences before they disappeared under drifts. Clara worked alongside the men without complaint, earning their respect with every shared hardship. Your missus is something, Jim told Elias as they repaired storm damage to the barn roof. Yesterday she doctored that cut on Billy's hand gentle as his own mother, then turned around and helped Miguel haul a half-frozen calf out of a drift. She's surprising, Elias agreed. You love her yet? The question caught him off guard. Jim, just wondering. Man marries for practical reasons. Sometimes the rest follows, sometimes it doesn't. Elias hammered a nail with more force than necessary. We're still getting acquainted. Uh-huh. Jim's tone was knowing. Well, you better get acquainted faster. Woman like that won't lack for admirers, ring or no ring. That evening, Elias found Clara in the barn, tending to her horse. She'd named the mare Sage, and the animal already followed her like a pet. Thought I'd check her hooves, Clara said without looking up. That ice was rough today. You're good with animals. They're honest, easier than people sometimes. She set down the hoof pick. Something on your mind? He'd come out here with half a dozen things to say, but what came out was, tell me about your boy, the one you lost. Her hands stilled. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer, then, Samuel. We called him Sam. 3 years old when the fever took him. She resumed her work, movements careful and precise. Bright as a new penny. Thomas used to say he'd be a scholar someday, the way he asked questions about everything. I'm sorry. It was 4 years ago. The sharp edges have worn down some. She moved to the next hoof. Do you want children, Elias? Really want them? Not just for the ranch? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Maybe it started practical, legacy, extra hands, all that. But lately, he gestured helplessly. The house feels too big, too quiet. Houses are meant to hold life. She straightened, meeting his eyes. That's why I answered your advertisement, not just for security or a new start. I want children again. Want to hear laughter in the halls, even if it means sleepless nights and endless worry. Even 10, he tried for lightness. Let's start with 1 and see how we manage. Her smile was soft. Though I'd better warn you, Thomas's mother birthed 12 healthy babies. Good breeding stock, my father-in-law used to joke. Clara. He stepped closer, drawn by something in her expression. This arrangement of ours is working out better than either of us expected? She didn't move away. Yes, I'd say so. The men respect you, the ranch runs smoother, and I'll boss. Billy's voice shattered the moment. Riders coming, lots of them. Elias cursed under his breath. Clara laughed, actually laughed. I go, she said. I'll put coffee on. Something tells me we'll need it. The riders were from the Double G, Gibson's spread. 10 men, all armed, led by Gibson himself. A thin man who always looked like he'd bitten into something sour. He dismounted with theatrical care. Boone, heard you had some trouble with rustlers. Matter of fact, I did. Sheriff Morton has them locked up. Also heard you've been making accusations, saying I might be involved. Elias kept his hands visible and relaxed. Behind him, he knew his men were spreading out, ready. Never mentioned your name, Gibson. You got a guilty conscience about something? Gibson's face flushed. I came here to tell you to watch your tongue, and to make an offer. Not interested in selling. You haven't heard my price. I don't need to. Clara appeared on the porch, coffee pot in hand. Gentlemen, a cold night for a social call. Would anyone care for something hot? Her arrival shifted the tension. Some of Gibson's men actually touched their hat brims. Gibson himself looked nonplussed. Mrs. Boone, he managed. Mr. Gibson. She descended the steps gracefully. I've heard so much about you. How's your wife? Martha, isn't it? I've been meaning to call, but with the storm and all. It was masterful. In 3 sentences, she'd reminded everyone present that this was a civilized community where women made social calls and men didn't start range wars. She's fine, Gibson said. I should go. Without coffee? That would be a shame. And you've ridden so far. She was already pouring, handing cups to his men who took them automatically. Elias, weren't you saying just yesterday how you hope to mend fences with the neighbors? Literally and figuratively? Elias picked up her lead. That's right. Winter's hard enough without adding feuds to it. Gibson found himself holding a cup of coffee, surrounded by his men who were gratefully warming their hands on Clara's offering. The moment for threats had passed. We've no quarrel with you, Boone, he said finally. Long as you keep your cattle on your side of the fence. The same goes for you. Gibson handed back his cup untouched. Ma'am, we'll be going. They watched the riders disappear into the darkness. Clara collected cups with steady hands. That was either very brave or very foolish, Elias said. Probably both. She headed back to the house. But men rarely start fights in front of ladies. It's not considered sporting. He'll be back. Maybe, but not tonight. And tomorrow we'll be ready. She paused at the door. We will be ready, won't we? It will be ready, he promised. Inside, the hands were talking excitedly about the confrontation. Clara served coffee and slices of dried apple pie, letting them burn off tension with words. Never seen Gibson back down like that, Tom marveled. Mrs. Boone, you've got more sand than a dozen cowboys. Just common sense, Clara deflected. No point in letting tempers boil over when there's coffee getting cold. But later, as the house settled for the night, Elias found her checking the loads in Thomas's old shotgun. He thought you believed in the civilizing power of coffee and conversation, he said. I do. She snapped the breech closed. I also believe in being prepared. Gibson's not the type to forget a humiliation. You humiliated him? I treated him like a neighbor instead of a threat. For a man like that, it amounts to the same thing. She set the shotgun by the kitchen door. We should post watches, just for a few nights. Already arranged it with Jim. He hesitated. Clara, what you did out there was necessary, just like the storm, just like everything else. She turned to face him. I meant what I said about being partners. Elias. That means standing together against whatever comes, even if it means danger. Especially then. She moved past him toward the stairs, pausing to add, 3 weeks left in that month. In case you were wondering. He was, Lord help him, he was counting days like a schoolboy. But there was too much unsettled to think about that now. Gibson, the mysterious buyer Morton had mentioned. The sense that larger forces were moving around them, all of it would have to be faced. But not tonight. Tonight. The storm had passed, the cattle were safe, and his remarkable wife was climbing the stairs to her solitary bed. 3 weeks. It seemed both forever and no time at all. The woman arrived on the afternoon stage 3 weeks later, dressed in traveling silk that had never seen honest dust. Clara watched from the general store window as the stranger stepped down, assisted by a man in a city suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "That's trouble in a bustle," Martha Henderson murmured beside her. The shopkeeper's wife had become Clara's closest friend in town, a font of gossip tempered with good sense. "You know her?" "Never seen her before, but I know the type. See how she's looking around like she owns the place?" Martha sniffed. "Mark my words, that one's here for a reason, and it's not the scenery." Clara continued folding the bolt of calico she'd been examining, but her eyes tracked the woman's progress toward the hotel. Auburn hair piled high, fashionable jacket nipped at the waist, boots that wouldn't last an hour on ranch ground. Everything about her screamed money and Eastern sophistication. "Could be she's the buyer Morton mentioned," Clara said carefully. "The one asking about land." "It could be." Martha didn't sound convinced. "Or could be she's running from something. Women like that don't come to Wyoming for the climate." Clara made her purchases: thread, needles, a length of warm wool for winter shirts, and headed for the wagon. But as she passed the hotel, the woman emerged, nearly colliding with her. "Oh," the stranger's voice was cultured, with a hint of southern honey. "I do apologize. I'm still finding my land legs after that dreadful stage ride." "No harm done." Clara shifted her parcel, studying the woman up close. Beautiful, yes, but with a hardness around the eyes that powder couldn't hide. "Welcome to Cheyenne." "Thank you. I'm Lenora Hale." She extended a gloved hand. "I'm looking for the Boone Ranch. Perhaps you could direct me?" Clara's blood chilled, but she kept her expression neutral. "I could do better than that. I'm Clara Boone, Elias's wife." Something flickered across Lenora's face. Surprise, calculation, maybe disappointment. "His wife? How recent?" 6 weeks now. Clara smiled pleasantly. "Were you acquainted with my husband?" "We were connected years ago." Lenora's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Before he buried himself out here playing cowboy. I've come on a matter of business." "Then you'll want to speak with both of us. The ranch is an hour's ride north. Though I should warn you, the road's rough. Your dress—" "He will survive. I'm tougher than I look. Mrs. Boone." The emphasis on the title was subtle but unmistakable. "Shall we say tomorrow? I'll need to hire a carriage." "Tomorrow," Clara agreed. "Come for lunch, 1 o'clock. She kept her composure until the wagon was out of town, then gave the horses their head while her mind raced. Lenora Hale. The name meant nothing, but the woman's manner suggested history. "Connected," she'd said. "Years ago. Elias was in the barn when she returned, working on a broken bridle." He looked up at her entrance, smile fading as he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" "A woman came to town today. Lenora Hale. Says she knows you." His hands stilled. "Lenora's here?" "So you do know her." Clara kept her voice level. "She's coming tomorrow, said it was business." Elias set down the bridle, running a hand through his hair. "I should have told you we were involved 8 years ago in Denver. I asked her to marry me." The words hit like a physical blow, but Clara had learned young to hide pain. "And?" She laughed, said she wouldn't waste herself on a rancher with big dreams and small prospects. "Last I heard, she'd married some railroad money back east, Well, she's here now, and she knew about me, though she pretended surprise. Clara began unpacking her purchases, needing something to do with her hands. Whatever business she has, it's not going to be simple. Clara, he crossed to her, caught her hands. Whatever Lenora wants, it doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? She met his eyes. A woman you wanted to marry shows up just as we're... She trailed off, unable to name what they were becoming. Just as we're what? You know what? She pulled free. That month you gave me, it's nearly up. I know exactly how long it's been. His voice dropped. 26 days. And if you think Lenora Hale showing up changes how I've come to feel... Boss, Jim's shout interrupted. We got company. They hurried outside to find Sheriff Morton riding up with 2 deputies. Afternoon, folks. Sorry to disturb, but I've got some questions about those rustlers we locked up. What about them? Elias asked. They're dead, all 4. Found them in their cells this morning. No marks, no signs of struggle. Doc says poison, probably in their food. Clara felt cold despite the afternoon sun. Who had access? That's what I'm trying to figure. Morton dismounted heavily. Those boys were ready to talk, too. Yesterday, one of them was hinting about being hired by someone with connections. Now they'll never tell what they knew. Convenient, Elias said grimly. That's what I thought. You had any more trouble, any strangers around? Clara and Elias exchanged glances. A woman arrived today, Clara said. Lenora Hale. Claims to have business with my husband. Morton's eyes sharpened. That name mean anything to you, Boone? We knew each other years ago, in Denver. Denver. Morton pulled out a notebook. Those rustlers had a Denver connection. One of them had a letter from some law firm there, Prescott and Associates. Never heard of them, Elias said. But Clara had. She'd seen that name on documents at the land office when she'd been researching property records. Sheriff, does Gibson use a law firm from Denver? Now that you mention it. Morton scratched his jaw. Saw some fancy lawyer at his place last month. Could have been from Denver. After Morton left, promising to investigate further. Clara and Elias stood in the kitchen, processing what they'd learned. It's connected, Clara said. Lenora, the rustlers, maybe even Gibson. Someone wants this ranch. The water rights. Elias moved to the window, staring out at the land his father had claimed. With the railroad expanding, water's going to be worth more than gold. So what do? Would we be ready? He turned back to her. And tomorrow, we find out what Lenora really wants. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about Elias asking another woman to marry him, about the hurt in his voice when he spoke of her rejection, about dead men in cells and the price of water in a dry land. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Clara, you awake? She sat up. Come in. Elias entered, lamp in hand. He'd never come to her room before, and the intimacy of it made her pull her wrapper closer. I need to tell you about Lenora, all of it. You don't owe me explanations. Don't I? He set the lamp on the dresser, took the chair by the window. I met her when I was 28, young, foolish, thought I could conquer the world. She was performing at the Palace Theater. Performing? She sang, voice like an angel, she said, though I was too smitten to judge fair. His smile was rueful. I courted her for months, spent money I didn't have on flowers and dinners. When I finally proposed, offered her this ranch in my heart, she looked at me like I'd offered her a handful of dirt. I'm sorry. Don't be. She did me a favor, though it took years to see it. Lenora wanted wealth and position. I wanted a partner. He looked at her directly. I found one. Did you love her? The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. I thought I did. Now. He stood, crossed to where she sat. Now I know the difference between wanting something and building something, between pretty words and strong hands, between a performance and a partnership. He touched her cheek, just barely. That month you asked for. It's been the longest and shortest of my life. But I'll wait longer if you need. Elias. Just think about it. He picked up the lamp. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember, you're my wife. Not because of a piece of paper or a preacher's words. Because you rode into a blizzard for cattle that weren't even yours yet. Because you stand between me and trouble with coffee and steel. Because you're building something here with me. Not just living in what I built. He left, closing the door softly. Clara sat in the dark, hand pressed to where he'd touched her cheek. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, she knew where she stood. The next day dawned clear and cold. Clara threw herself into preparations, cooking as if for Sunday dinner. If Lenora wanted to play society games, she'd find Clara ready. You're making enough for an army, Tom observed, and sneaking a taste of the gravy. Strategy. Clara swatted his hand away. Never let an enemy see you worried. She's an enemy, then. Anyone who shows up unannounced claiming business with my husband bears watching. She checked the roast, satisfied with its progress. Besides, a full stomach makes men less likely to do something foolish. Like what? Like falling for whatever she's selling. Lenora arrived precisely at 1, this time in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than the ranch hands made in a year. The lawyer, definitely Prescott from the Denver firm, accompanied her, looking miserable in the wind. Clara, how lovely. Lenora swept in like she owned the place. And this rustic charm, how authentic. We like it. Clara took her cloak with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elias is in the parlor. The meeting was a dance of words and implications. Lenora perched on the good chair like a queen granting audience, the lawyer shuffling papers beside her. I'll be direct, Lenora began, though Clara doubted she'd been direct in her life. I've recently come into some documents that suggest a complication with your ownership of this ranch. What kind of complication? Elias's voice was steady. It seems there was a prior claim filed on this land, never properly resolved. She produced a paper with theatrical timing. My late husband's family had investments in the original territory grants. When I was going through his papers, I discovered this. Clara took the document before Elias could, scanning it with eyes trained by her own land troubles in Missouri. This is dated 1858, a year before Elias's father filed his claim. Exactly, which would make it senior. Except, Clara smiled pleasantly. This seal is wrong. Wyoming Territory wasn't established until 1868. This document references territorial law that didn't exist in 1858. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Lenora's composure cracked slightly. Perhaps there's some confusion about dates. No confusion. Clara set the paper aside. This is forged. Recently, I'd guess, given how crisp the ink is for a 20-year-old document. How dare you? Moreover, Clara continued calmly, I spent yesterday at the land office. Your late husband, if he existed, never owned land in Wyoming. The Hale family of Boston has no Western holdings. I checked. Lenora stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. To Preston, tell them. Actually, the lawyer interrupted, looking relieved. I believe Mrs. Boone has made some excellent points. Perhaps we should reconsider our position. You spineless. Lenora caught herself, fixed a smile back in place. Well, it seems I've been misled by my advisors. I do apologize for wasting your time. Not at all. Clara stood as well. But perhaps you could satisfy my curiosity. Who really sent you, Gibson, the railroad? For a moment, Lenora's mask slipped entirely. You think you're so clever, so secure with your marriage certificate and your provincial little life. But there are bigger forces at work here than you know. This land will be worth millions when... She stopped, color draining from her face. When what? Elias stepped forward. When the railroad comes through? When they need water for the steam engines? Lenora grabbed her cloak. I should go. Yes, Clara agreed. You should. And Lenora? If you're thinking of trying this again, remember we have copies of that forged document. I'm sure Sheriff Morton would be very interested to see it, especially given those dead rustlers and their Denver connections. The woman fled with the lawyer trailing behind. Clara and Elias stood at the window, watching their carriage disappear in a cloud of dust. You knew, Elias said, about the forgery. How? I've seen enough false documents to recognize one. Men tried the same thing to steal farms in Missouri during the war. She began clearing the untouched lunch. The question is, what do we do now? Now, Elias caught her hand, stopped her bustling. Now I ask you something. These 3 days until your month is up, do we need them? She looked at him. This man who'd stood silent while another woman tried to steal his land, trusting his wife to handle it. Who'd chosen her strength over Lenora's beauty without hesitation. No, she said softly, and we don't. Thank God. He pulled her close, and this kiss was nothing like their wedding day. This was heat and promise and the breaking of a dam too long held back. When they parted, both breathing hard, Clara touched his face. She was right about one thing. There are bigger forces at work. This isn't over. I know. He rested his forehead against hers. But we'll face them together, partners. Partners, she agreed. Then with a smile that made him catch his breath. Though I think it's time we were partners in everything, don't you? He swept her up in answer, carrying her toward the stairs while she laughed and protested about the dishes. But the dishes could wait. Everything could wait except this. This next step in building something together. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow. Winter was coming in earnest now, and with it, whatever schemes their enemies were hatching. But inside the house, warmth and laughter pushed back the cold. And in the bedroom at the top of the stairs, 2 people who'd started as strangers finished becoming one. The letter from Martha Henderson arrived 2 weeks after Lenora's visit, delivered by her youngest boy who'd ridden hard through morning snow. Ma says to come quick, the boy panted. She's found something important about that woman. Clara didn't hesitate. She saddled Sage while Elias gathered Jim and Tom. The revelations about Lenora's forged documents had bought them time, but they'd all been waiting for the next move. Martha's kitchen was warm and crowded. Along with Martha sat Mrs. Morrison, the Reverend's wife, and Sarah Johansson, whose husband ran the bank. Sit, Martha commanded, pouring coffee. Sarah, tell them what you told us. Sarah, a thin woman who rarely spoke above a whisper, cleared her throat. My Harold was going through some old correspondence yesterday, papers from the Denver branch. He found letters between Lenora Hale and a Mr. Cyrus Whitman. Whitman? Elias said slowly. He tried to buy the ranch 2 years ago, offered twice what it was worth. He's been buying land all along the proposed railroad route. Sarah continued, but quietly, through intermediaries. Harold thinks... She glanced around nervously. He thinks Whitman's working with someone inside the railroad company. Someone who knows exactly where the main line will run. And our ranch sits right where they'd need water rights, Clara finished. There's more, Martha said grimly. Rebecca Carson was in yesterday. Said she overheard Lenora at the hotel talking to that lawyer. Something about if the legal route fails. There are other ways. What kind of other ways? Tom asked. The women exchanged glances. Mrs. Morrison spoke up. The kind that left 4 men dead in their cells. I'd wager. The ride home was quiet, each lost in thought. As they crested the last hill, Elias suddenly reined up. Smoke, he said, were too much for chimney fires. They spurred forward, coming over the rise to see the hay barn ablaze. The ranch hands were already forming a bucket brigade, but the fire had taken hold deep. The horses... Clara was off sage before Elias could stop her, running toward the smaller barn where they kept the breeding stock. The smoke was thick, horses screaming in terror. Clara threw open stalls, dodging hooves and teeth as the panicked animals fled. She'd freed 3 when a beam crashed down, blocking her path to the last stall where her mare's favorite, a young colt, was trapped. Then Elias was there, shoulder against the burning beam, lifting it enough for her to squeeze through. Together they got the colt out, stumbling into clean air as the roof began to collapse. Are you insane? Elias gripped her shoulders, eyes wild. You could have been killed. So could you, she shot back, then started coughing too hard to continue. He pulled her against him, holding tight while the barn died behind them. Around them, men shouted and horses milled, but for a moment there was just the 2 of them, alive and together. Don't ever, he started. You either, she interrupted, and he laughed despite everything, a raw sound of relief. The damage was bad but not catastrophic. They'd lost the hay barn and most of their winter feed, but the horses were safe and no one was seriously hurt. As the men worked to contain the remaining flames, Jim found something troubling. Coal oil, he said, holding up a charred tin. This was no accident. Gibson? Tom suggested. He may be. Elias studied the burned building. Or Whitman's people, whoever it was, they're getting bolder. That night, Clara treated burns and scrapes in the kitchen turned makeshift hospital. Billy had singed his hands badly, and Miguel had a gash from flying debris. She worked with quiet efficiency, the men trusting her touch without question. We'll need to buy feed, she said as she wrapped Billy's hands. The Carsons might sell some, and the Johanssons have extra. It'll cost, Jim warned. This late in the season, everyone knows we're desperate. Then we'll pay. Clara tied off the bandage. The cattle come first. Elias watched her work, something fierce and proud in his expression. When the last man was tended and the kitchen empty, he caught her hand. You terrify me, he said quietly. The way you ran into that fire, I couldn't let them burn. She touched his face, feeling the day's stubble. Any more than you could let me go in alone. We make a dangerous pair, the best kind. She rose on her toes to kiss him, tasting smoke and fear and love all mixed together. Now come to bed. Tomorrow we start fighting back. The next days were a blur of activity. Clara organized the women of the town, creating a network of information that rivaled any telegraph. Every stranger was noted, every odd conversation reported. Meanwhile, Elias and the men reinforced security, posting guards and checking fences twice daily. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Preston, the nervous lawyer who'd accompanied Lenora, appeared at their door one evening, looking over his shoulder like a hunted deer. I need protection, he blurted. They're going to kill me like they did those rustlers. Clara ushered him inside while Elias fetched Jim. The lawyer was trembling, clutching a leather portfolio. Start from the beginning, Clara said, pouring whiskey with a liberal hand. Whitman hired me 6 months ago. Said it was simple land acquisition, all legal. But then things got complicated. First the rustlers. That was meant to make you desperate to sell. When that failed, Lenora suggested the forged documents. And the fire? Elias asked. That wasn't supposed to happen, just scare tactics, Whitman said. But Lenora... He took a shaking sip. She's got her own agenda. I heard her talking to someone, planning worse things. Accidents, she called them. Who was she talking to? Clara leaned forward. I don't know, but I brought these. He opened the portfolio, revealing documents and correspondence. Proof of Whitman's scheme. Names, dates, amounts paid, even letters from someone at the railroad. Elias studied the papers. This is evidence of conspiracy, federal crime, interfering with land rights, which is why they'll kill me. Preston looked miserable. I'm supposed to meet Lenora tomorrow, tell her I've destroyed all copies, but she'll know I'm lying, as she always knows. Then we'll make sure you don't meet her alone. Clara decided Sheriff Morton needs to see these tonight. They rode to town in force, Elias, Clara, Jim, Tom, and the terrified lawyer. Morton's house was dark, but he answered their knock quickly, gun in hand. The trouble? The kind that needs federal marshals, Elias said. We've got evidence of a conspiracy involving railroad speculation and murder. Morton's eyes sharpened. He was a good lawman, limited only by jurisdiction and resources. This was the kind of case that could make or break a career. They spent 2 hours going through documents. Preston's voice growing steadier as he realized the law might actually protect him. Morton sent his deputy to telegraph Denver, requesting immediate marshal assistance. They'll be here in 3 days, Morton said. When can you keep your witness safe that long? Ooh, we'll manage, Elias promised. But Lenora had other plans. They were halfway home when riders emerged from the darkness, 6 men, faces covered, guns drawn. A hand over the lawyer, one called. No one else needs to get hurt. Can't do that, Elias replied calmly, though Clara could see his hand inching toward his rifle. And then you'll all die. The gunfight was brief but vicious. Clara's shotgun boomed, taking one rider from his saddle. Tom's rifle cracked, then Jim's. Elias shielded Preston with his body, returning fire with deadly accuracy. When the smoke cleared, 2 attackers lay dead. The rest fled. Tom had a graze on his arm and one of the horses was down, but they'd survived. That tears it, Jim said grimly. They'll come at the ranch next. Let them, Clara said, reloading with steady hand. We'll be ready. They turned the ranch into a fortress. The women from town arrived with food and ammunition, their husbands joining the defense. Even Gibson showed up, grudging but worried about the precedent of outside violence. Don't like you, Boone, he said bluntly. But I like Chicago money telling us what to do even less. The attack came at dawn on the 2nd day. 20 men, professional guns hired from God knows where. But they faced a united community, fighting for more than land, fighting for the right to live free of outside interference. Clara manned the house's upper windows with Martha and Sarah, their rifles speaking in measured counterpoint to the men's volleys. Preston cowered in the root cellar, but he was alive and ready to testify. The battle might have gone either way, but then the cavalry arrived, literally. The federal marshals had made better time than expected, accompanied by a full army patrol. The sight of blue uniforms sent the attackers scattering. Elias Boone, the lead marshal, dismounted. I understand you have evidence of criminal conspiracy? The cleanup took days. Whitman was arrested in Denver, his scheme unraveling as conspirators turned on each other. Lenora tried to run but was caught at the territorial border. Her beauty no defense against federal charges. Preston testified to everything, earning himself a reduced sentence and a new life in California. The railroad company, embarrassed by the scandal, publicly announced their route would go 50 miles north, making all of Whitman's schemes worthless. So we're safe, Clara said, standing with Elias on their porch as the last marshal rode away. No more threats to the ranch. Seems so. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. Disappointed. Life might get boring. Boring? She laughed. We have a ranch to run, cattle to raise, and if I'm not mistaken, a family to start. When would we have time for boring? He turned her to face him. About that family. Yes, but she was smiling, already knowing. How do you feel about starting soon, say in about 7 months? I think, she said, pulling him down for a kiss. That sounds just about perfect, though we might have to renegotiate that number 10. We'll see, he said against her lips. We'll see. Inside the house, life went on. The hands celebrated in the bunkhouse, grateful for survival and the promise of steady work. The dogs dozed by the fire, worn out from all the excitement. And upstairs, in the room that would soon be a nursery. Moonlight fell on the cradle Elias had already started building. The threats were past, but the future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. They'd fought for this land, bled for it, nearly died for it. Now they could live for it, together, partners in every sense of the word. And if Clara had her way, they'd need a bigger house soon. After all, 10 was just a number. What mattered was filling this place with life and laughter, with children who'd inherit not just land but the knowledge that some things were worth fighting for. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight, there was peace in each other and the vast Wyoming sky full of stars. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The town hall was packed to the rafters, voices rising in heated debate. Clara sat in the front row, her hands folded over the gentle swell beneath her winter coat, watching as Elias faced down half the territory's legal establishment. The evidence is clear, Judge Harrison declared from behind his makeshift bench. Multiple witnesses have testified that Mrs. Boone, formerly Mrs. Hale, was legally married to Elias Boone 8 years ago in Denver. That's a lie, Elias said flatly. I never married Lenora Hale. We have the certificate. Lenora's new lawyer, a sharp-faced man from San Francisco, waved the document, witnessed and filed with the Denver courthouse. From her seat, Clara could see the trap closing, in the 2 months since Lenora's arrest for the conspiracy charges. Someone had been busy. Very busy. The federal case had fallen apart when key witnesses disappeared, and now Lenora was back with a new scheme, claiming to be Elias's legal wife. If this marriage is valid, the lawyer continued smoothly, then Mr. Boone's subsequent marriage to Clara Dempsey is bigamous and void. Mrs. Hale is entitled to her share of the marital assets. Half the ranch, Lenora added sweetly. It's only fair. Clara stood slowly, aware of every eye in the room turning to her. 7 months pregnant and tired of games. She'd had enough. May I see this certificate? Judge Harrison hesitated. Mrs. Boone, you're not a party to... I'm either Mrs. Boone or I'm not. Clara interrupted. Which is it, Your Honor? Either I have standing as Elias's wife, or this whole proceeding is about dividing property between 2 single people. The judge flushed but nodded. Clara took the certificate, studying it with the same careful attention she'd given Lenora's forged land documents months ago. Interesting, she murmured. Elias, where were you on June 15th, 1871? The date of the supposed marriage, Elias thought. Driving cattle to Fort Laramie. Took 3 weeks there and back. Can you prove that? Army records should show it. We sold them 500 head. Clara smiled. And yet this certificate says you were in Denver, marrying Miss Hale. Tell me, Lenora, did your husband have the gift of being in 2 places at once? Papers can be misdated, Lenora began. Yes, they can. Clara produced a folder from her coat. which is why I took the liberty of investigating. Your Honor, I present records from the Denver courthouse showing that no marriage between Elias Boone and Lenora Hale was registered in 1871. Or any other year. Those records could be incomplete. I also have affidavits from the supposed witnesses. Clara pulled out more papers. Mr. James Thurston died in 1869, 2 years before he supposedly witnessed this marriage. Mrs. Adelaide Perkins has been confined to a Boston asylum since 1868. Rather careless of them to witness a ceremony in Denver. The crowd murmured. Lenora's face had gone pale. Furthermore, Clara continued, warming to her theme, I have here a copy of Miss Hale's actual marriage certificate to Mr. Josiah Whitman, dated August 3, 1871, less than 2 months after she supposedly married Elias. Whitman? The judge leaned forward. The man arrested for the railroad conspiracy? His brother, actually, though the families are close. Clara let the implication hang. It seems the Whitmans have been trying to get their hands on Boone Ranch for years. When Cyrus's criminal scheme failed, Josiah's widow decided to try a different approach. This is preposterous. Lenora stood, silk rustling. You can't prove... Actually, I can... Clara's voice cut like winter wind. Sheriff Morton? Morton stepped forward from the back of the room. Mrs. Boone asked me to check the Denver telegraph office. Found some interesting messages between Mrs. Whitman here and a forger named Patterson. Same man who made those land documents she tried before. I demand proof, the San Francisco lawyer blustered. I got it right here. Morton produced a telegram. Patterson turned state's evidence yesterday, some full confession. Says Mrs. Whitman paid him $500 for the marriage certificate. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison banged his gavel repeatedly before achieving order. Mrs. Whitman or Hale or whoever you are, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted fraud, and conspiracy. Again. He looked disgusted. Marshal, take her away. You! Lenora turned on Clara as the marshals approached. You sanctimonious little... Careful, Clara said mildly. There are children present. As Lenora was dragged out, still cursing. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Boone, the court apologizes for this waste of your time. The marriage between Elias and Clara Boone is clearly valid. Case dismissed. Outside, in the cold February air, Clara leaned against Elias as the tension finally caught up with her. You were magnificent, he said. How did you know about the witnesses? Hey, Martha helped. Her cousin works at the Denver courthouse. We've been building this case for weeks. She pressed a hand to her back. Though I could have done without the drama. The baby's been dancing on my spine all morning. Let's get you home. He helped her to the wagon where Jim waited with hot bricks for her feet. You think that's the last we'll see of her? Jim asked as they drove out of town. She'll do prison time now. Elias said, between this and what's left of the conspiracy charges, she's finished. But Clara was quiet, remembering the venom in Lenora's eyes. Women like that didn't give up easily. They'd have to stay watchful. Back at the ranch, life settled into late winter rhythms. Clara's pregnancy advanced, and with it came the fussing of every woman in 50 miles. Martha Henderson practically moved in, declaring no first-time mother should face birthing season without proper help. A birthing season? Clara laughed from her chair by the fire, knitting yet another small blanket. I'm not a cow, Martha. The same principles apply. Spring babies, calves, or colts, they all come when they're ready, not when we are. Martha checked the stew simmering on the stove. Elias hovering yet? Like a worried hen. Clara smiled at the thought. Her husband had taken to following her around, catching her elbow if she so much as stepped wrong. Yesterday he tried to carry me up the stairs. Let him fuss. Men need to feel useful when they can't fix what's happening. Martha settled into the opposite chair. My Harold painted the house 3 times while I was carrying our first. Couldn't stand the waiting. The piece was shattered 2 nights later. Clara woke to Sage's frantic whinnying and the dogs barking themselves hoarse. She shook Elias awake. Something's wrong. He was up instantly, pulling on clothes and reaching for his rifle. Stay here. Like hell. She was already struggling into her wrapper. Clara, please, the baby. A window shattered downstairs. Then another. Fire bottles, Jim's voice roared from outside. They're throwing fire bottles. Clara grabbed the shotgun from beside the door. 7 months pregnant or not, nobody was burning down her home. The scene downstairs was chaos. Flames licked at the curtains while masked riders circled the house, hurling bottles of kerosene with burning rags. The hands were returning fire, but the attackers kept moving, hard to hit in the darkness. A kitchen, Clara ordered Tom, who'd taken shelter behind the overturned table. Water buckets now! She and Martha, who'd appeared from the guest room with her own rifle, organized a bucket brigade while the men fought. The smoke was thickening when Elias grabbed her. They're trying to smoke us out. We need to... His words were cut off by a new sound, a woman screaming, not in fear but in rage. Oh, burn it all, Lenora's voice carried through the night. Burn them out like rats. She escaped, Clara breathed. How did she escape? Doesn't matter. Elias pushed her toward the root cellar. Get below. You and Martha and... No, Clara pulled free. This is my home. Our child's home. I won't hide while she destroys it. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then, salvation came from an unexpected source. Gibson and his men, drawn by the smoke and gunfire, rode in like avenging angels. Nobody burns out a neighbor, Gibson roared, his men's rifles adding to the defense. Not on my watch. The tide turned quickly, outnumbered now. Lenora's hired guns began to flee, but Lenora herself, perhaps mad with rage or desperation, rode straight for the house. Clara saw her coming, saw the gun in her hand aimed at the window where Elias stood. Time slowed. Clara raised the shotgun, breathed, squeezed. The blast took Lenora from her saddle. She hit the ground hard and didn't get up. In the sudden silence that followed, Clara lowered the smoking gun. Her hands were steady, but inside she felt hollow. She'd never killed anyone before. Clara? Elias was beside her, checking for injuries. I'm fine. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Is she? Jim had gone to check. He looked up, nodded once. It was her or me, Clara said quietly. Her or you. Her or our baby. You don't have to justify it. Elias pulled her close. Not to me, not to anyone. Sheriff Morton arrived with Dawn, taking statements and supervising the removal of bodies. 3 attackers dead, including Lenora. The rest scattered to the wind. Self-defense, clear as day, Morton declared. Though how she escaped custody in Denver. Money, Gibson said bluntly. He'd stayed to help, earning Clara's grudging respect. Woman like that always had money hidden somewhere. Probably bribed a guard. Well, she won't be bribing anyone else. Morton closed his notebook. Mrs. Boone, I'm sorry you had to... That is, I'm sorry too, Clara said simply. Sorry it came to this. Sorry she couldn't let go. Sorry for the waste of it all. The cleanup took days. Neighbors arrived to help repair the damage, turning it into an impromptu barn raising. By week's end, the house stood whole again, bearing only faint scars from the attack. You'd never know. Martha marveled, admiring the new windows. We know, Clara said, hand on her belly. But we survived. That's what matters. That night, as they lay in bed, Elias asked, Do you regret it? Any of it? Clara considered. The violence, the fear, the moment she'd pulled the trigger, all of it weighed on her. But no, she said finally. I regret that Lenora made the choices she did. I regret the pain and fear, but I don't regret defending what's ours. I don't regret fighting for our future. Our future. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling the baby kick. Think he knows how brave his mother is? She, Clara corrected, and she knows she's loved. That's enough for now. She? Elias grinned. You sound certain. Her mother's intuition. Clara smiled back. Though we might need to try for that son next time. Next time? Already planning ahead? Well, you did say 10. He laughed, pulling her close. We'll see, Mrs. Boone, we'll see. Outside, spring was coming. Already the snow was melting, revealing green shoots beneath. The cattle were healthy. The ranch was secure, and their child would be born into peace. It had been a hard winter, a season of trials that tested them in every way. But they'd emerged stronger, their partnership forged in fire and proved in battle. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And maybe, Clara thought as sleep claimed her, they might even manage those 10 children. After all, they'd need plenty of hands to run a ranch this size, plenty of voices to fill these rooms with laughter, plenty of hearts to carry on what they'd fought so hard to build. The papers arrived on a Thursday morning in late March, just as Clara was finishing breakfast. The baby, Elizabeth, as Elias had predicted. A girl, nursed contentedly in her arms while spring sunshine streamed through the kitchen windows. Official looking, Jim commented, handing over the thick envelope the postal rider had delivered. Denver postmark. Clara shifted Elizabeth to one arm, breaking the seal with practiced efficiency. Her face changed as she read, color draining. What is it? Elias asked, immediately alert. Legal notice. Her voice was steady, but he could see her jaw tighten. The territory of Wyoming versus Elias and Clara Boone. We're being sued for wrongful death. What? He took the papers, scanning rapidly. Lenora's estate is suing us. She attacked our home. Her attorneys claim we lured her here, that we set a trap. Clara stood pacing to the window with Elizabeth. They're asking for damages equal to the full value of the ranch. Jim whistled low. Can they do that? They can try. Clara's mind was already working, sorting through implications. The Whitman money again. They must have hired the best lawyers in Denver. Morton cleared us, Elias protested. It was self-defense. Criminal charges, yes, but civil suits are different. She turned to face them. They don't have to prove we murdered her, just that our actions led to her death. That's insane. She came here with armed men who are all conveniently dead or disappeared. Clara shifted Elizabeth to her shoulder, patting her back gently. Our word against a grieving family's lawyers. Elias slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups jump. After everything we've been through, we'll fight it. Clara's voice cut through his anger. Just like we've fought everything else, Jim, ride to town. We need Harold Johansson to recommend a lawyer, a good one. The kind that costs, Jim said carefully. The kind that wins, Clara corrected. Go. After Jim left, Elias found Clara in the nursery, rocking Elizabeth in the chair he'd made. We could lose everything, he said quietly. We could. She didn't look up from their daughter's face. But we won't. How can you be so sure? Now she did look at him. Because I've lost everything before. Home, husband, child. I survived. We survived worse than lawyers. Elias, we'll survive this too. The lawyer Harold recommended came from Cheyenne, a young man named David Cartwright who looked too fresh-faced to battle Denver's legal sharks. but his eyes were sharp as he reviewed their case. "The good news is they're overreaching," he said, spreading papers across the dining table. "Claiming damages for loss of consortium, future earnings, emotional suffering. It's a fishing expedition. They're hoping you'll settle rather than fight." "We won't settle," Clara said firmly. Good, because settling would imply guilt." Cartwright made notes. "I'll need depositions from everyone present that night. Sheriff Morton's report helps, but eyewitness testimony will be crucial." "What about Gibson?" Elias suggested. "He saw everything." "Would he testify for you?" Cartwright looked skeptical. "From what I understand, you weren't exactly friends." "We weren't enemies either," Clara said thoughtfully. "Not at the end." "Let me talk to his wife." The next days were a whirlwind of preparation. Clara, despite having a 2-month-old baby, threw herself into organizing their defense. She convinced not just Gibson but half the valley to provide statements. Martha Henderson proved especially valuable. "I was there," Martha declared to Cartwright. "Saw that woman screaming for blood. If Clara hadn't shot her, we'd all be dead." "Would you testify to that in court?" "In court, in church, or on the steps of the Capitol building?" Martha's chin lifted. "Nobody threatens babies in their cradles, not in my presence." The trial date was set for May. As it approached, strange things began happening. First, Tom's horse was found with a cut cinch, caught before he could ride. Then poison was discovered in the chicken feed, only Billy's sharp eyes preventing disaster. "They're trying to rattle us," Jim said after the third incident, "sugar in the water troughs. Or distract us." Clara was going through correspondence at the kitchen table, Elizabeth sleeping in a basket beside her. "Make us focus on protecting the ranch while they prepare their case." "Is it working?" Elias asked. She looked up, eyes hard as flint. "What do you think?" He smiled despite everything. "I think they don't know who they're dealing with." The truth of that became clear when Clara made her own move. She'd been writing letters for weeks, calling in favors, tracking down information. The results arrived 3 days before the trial. "Elias," she called from the porch where she'd been talking to a stranger. "We have a visitor." The man was weathered, dressed in worn trail clothes. He shifted nervously as Elias approached. "Mr. Boone, name's Pete Garrett. I rode with Lenora Whitman that night." Elias's hand moved toward his gun, but Clara touched his arm. "Mr. Garrett has something to say," she said calmly. "Something the court needs to hear." "I never signed on for what she planned," Garrett said quickly. "Thought it was just going to be threats, maybe property damage. But she was crazy, talking about burning folks alive. When I tried to back out, she pulled a gun on me, said I'd hang with the rest if I ran." "Why come forward now?" Elias demanded. "Mrs. Boone found me, offered me a deal." Garrett glanced at Clara with something like respect. "Testify truthfully and she'll pay my way to California. Stay quiet, and she'll make sure every lawman in 3 territories knows my face." "I carrot and stick," Clara said pleasantly. Mr. Garrett chose wisely. The trial drew crowds from 3 counties. The Whitman lawyers had imported a judge from Denver, expecting home advantage. They didn't count on Clara filling the courtroom with ranch families, all of whom had faced similar threats from outside money. "This is a simple case," the lead prosecutor declared in opening statements. "A wealthy woman, perhaps misguided in her methods, was lured to her death by the defendant's deliberate actions." Cartwright stood slowly. Despite his youth, his voice carried authority. "This is indeed a simple case of self-defense against a woman who tried to burn a family alive. Let me present the facts." The prosecution went first, painting Lenora as a wronged woman seeking only her rightful due. They brought character witnesses who spoke of her charity work in Denver, her patronage of the arts. "Did any of you know about her midnight rides?" Cartwright asked each one. "Her hired guns? Her escape from federal custody?" None did, or admitted to it. Then came the defense. Morton testified to the official investigation. Gibson, uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, grudgingly admitted that the Boones had been defending themselves. Martha Henderson made the court gasp with her vivid description of the attack. But it was Pete Garrett who turned the tide. "She was going to kill them all," he said, voice shaking. "Had it all planned. Burn the house, shoot anyone who ran out, said pregnant women burn faster." The prosecution tried to discredit him, but Garrett had details only an insider would know. Names of other hired guns, amounts paid, even where Lenora had hidden the money she'd used for bribes. "Why should we believe a confessed criminal?" the prosecutor demanded. "Because I've got nothing to gain but a clean conscience," Garrett replied. "I'm leaving this territory forever. Just wanted the truth told first." Clara testified last. She stood carefully, still recovering from childbirth, and faced the court with quiet dignity. "I'm a mother," she said simply. "That night, I had a choice. Let a mad woman burn my home with my baby inside, or stop her. I chose my child. I'd make the same choice again. You shot an unarmed woman," and the prosecutor accused. "I shot an arsonist who was actively trying to kill my family." Clara's voice never wavered. "She had a gun. She was aiming at my husband. The fact that she was a woman doesn't make her less dangerous. It makes her more so because people like you refuse to believe a woman capable of such evil." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. "We find for the defendants," the foreman announced, "and recommend the plaintiffs pay all court costs for bringing a frivolous suit." The courtroom erupted. Clara sagged against Elias, exhaustion finally showing. Elizabeth, who'd been remarkably quiet through the proceedings, chose that moment to announce her hunger with a piercing wail. "Let's go home," Elias said, guiding his family through the crowd of well-wishers. On the courthouse steps, they found Cartwright grinning like a boy with a new toy. "Outstanding work, Mrs. Boone. That witness was a masterstroke." "A justice usually is," Clara replied. "To send your bill to the ranch." "Already paid." Cartwright's grin widened. "Seems the judge was so annoyed by the prosecution's tactics, he ordered them to cover all legal fees. You won't owe a cent." As they drove home, Elizabeth finally settled. Clara leaned against Elias's shoulder. "It's over," she said, "really over this time." "You think the Whitmans will give up? After this public humiliation? They'll slink back to Denver and pretend they never heard of Wyoming." She smiled. "Besides, I had Cartwright file a countersuit, damages for harassment, lost wages, emotional distress. He thinks we'll settle for enough to buy another 1,000 acres. Elias laughed, sudden and bright. "You terrifying, wonderful woman." "I told you," she murmured, already half asleep. "Partners handle things together." That evening, the ranch celebrated. Jim broke out his fiddle, Tom his harmonica. The hands danced with kitchen girls from town while Martha commanded the food table like a general. Clara sat in her rocking chair on the porch, Elizabeth in her arms, watching the festivities. Elias stood behind her, hands on her shoulders. "Any regrets?" he asked. "It's been a harder year than either of us expected." "Look at what we have," Clara said, gesturing to the lamplit yard full of friends. "A home nobody can take, a daughter who'll grow up strong and free, a future we carved out of stubbornness and lead." "And each other," Elias added. "That most of all." She tilted her head back to look at him. "Though I recall something about 10 children. We're only at 1. "Oh, plenty of time," he assured her. Though after seeing you in that courtroom, I'm thinking we need daughters. All daughters. An army of women like their mother. Heaven help the world, Clara laughed. Heaven help anyone who crosses them, Elias corrected. The music played on, spilling across the darkened range. In her mother's arms, Elizabeth slept peacefully, unaware of the battles fought for her future. The threats were ended, the ranch was secure, and tomorrow stretched ahead full of promise. It had been a long road from that first meeting at the depot. Two strangers bound by necessity had become partners, lovers, parents. They'd faced storms and fire, lies and law, and emerged stronger for it. I love you, Elias said quietly, the words still new enough to catch in his throat. I know, Clara replied. Then because she was who she was. I love you too, even if you can't give me those 10 sons you promised. Woman, you'll be the death of me. Probably, she agreed cheerfully, but what a way to go. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal. The music played, friends laughed, and life went on. Here on the edge of civilization, they'd built something worth defending. And defend it they had, with lead and law, courage and cleverness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, calving season, spring planting, a daughter to raise. But tonight was for celebration, for remembering how far they'd come. Tonight was for victory. 2 years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch expanded. The 1,000 acres Clara had predicted became reality when the Whitman settlement came through. Elizabeth grew from baby to toddler, ruling the household with dimpled fists and determined squeals. And Clara's belly rounded again with their second child. Another girl, Martha Henderson declared, hands on Clara's stomach during one of her visits. Carrying high, just like with Elizabeth. Elias will be thrilled, Clara laughed, watching her husband through the window as he taught their daughter to pet the barn cats. He's already wrapped around Elizabeth's finger. Good men usually are. Martha poured tea, settling her bulk into the kitchen chair. Speaking of men, we need to talk about the school situation. Clara's expression sharpened. The valley's growth had brought new challenges. More families meant need for proper education. But the nearest school was a day's ride away. The meeting's tomorrow night? At the church. We need you there, Clara. You've got a way with words that cuts through nonsense. I'll be there. Clara rubbed her back, feeling the baby shift. Though someone else might have to do the talking if this little one decides to make an early appearance. The someone else turned out to be Elias. Clara's labor started just as they were preparing to leave for the meeting, sending the household into controlled chaos. Go, she told him between contractions. The school matters. You matter more. Elias Boone, if you think I'm going to let you hover and fret when there's work to be done, you don't know me at all. She gripped his hand through another wave of pain. Martha's here. Sarah's coming. Go represent our family. He went, reluctantly returning 4 hours later to find his second daughter already arrived and nursing contentedly. Meet Margaret, Clara said, exhausted but smiling. And tell me about the meeting. School's approved. They're building it on the Carson property, central to everyone. He touched Margaret's downy head with one finger, marvel in his eyes. You did it again. Had a baby? I had help with the starting part, as I recall. Created another miracle. He kissed her forehead. Though I meant the school. Martha said you wrote half the proposals they presented. Community effort, Clara yawned. Did Gibson support it? Surprisingly, yes, even offered lumber from his mill at cost. People change. She shifted Margaret to her other arm. Where's Elizabeth? Asleep in her bed, clutching that wooden horse Tom carved. She wanted to name her sister Horsey. Thank heaven for small victories. Clara's eyes were drooping. 2 daughters. Elias, your army is growing. By the time Margaret was walking, running, really chasing after Elizabeth with determined wobbles, the school was built and operational. Clara found herself on the board, helping hire teachers and set curriculum. We need practical education, she argued at one particularly heated meeting. Yes, Shakespeare is important, but so is accounting. These children will inherit ranches and businesses. Mrs. Boone has a point. The new teacher, Miss Josephine Hart, agreed. She was young but firm, come west from Ohio with excellent credentials in a no-nonsense manner. Perhaps we could integrate both? Clara liked her immediately. The school became a source of pride for the valley, drawing more families. With growth came prosperity, but also new challenges. The summer Margaret turned 1, rustlers hit 3 ranches in a week, not locals, but organized gangs from the territories. It's getting worse, Jim reported after riding patrol. Found tracks of at least a dozen riders near the south boundary. Same group that hit Carson's? Likely and professional from the look of it. Clara looked up from the ledger she was reviewing. We need a better system. Individual ranches can't defend against gangs that size. What do you suggest? Elias asked. Cooperation, shared patrols, communication system, maybe even a fund to hire additional security during peak seasons. Gibson won't like it, Tom pointed out. He's never been one for working with others. Then I'll talk to his wife first, Clara said calmly. Alice Gibson has more sense than her husband, and she's tired of losing cattle. The Ranchers' Mutual Protection Association, as it came to be called, started with just 4 families but grew quickly. Even Gibson joined after his wife's persistent pressure and the loss of 50 head to rustlers. Never thought I'd see the day, he grumbled at the first official meeting. Times change, Mr. Gibson, Clara replied, recording minutes in her neat hand. We change with them or get left behind. The system worked. Shared patrols and rapid communication cut rustling by more than half. Success bred success, and soon the association was coordinating everything from bulk supply purchases to negotiating railroad shipping rates. You've built something important here, Miss Hart told Clara one afternoon. They were watching the children play during recess, Elizabeth leading a pack of boys in some elaborate game while Margaret toddled after, determined not to be left out. We all built it, Clara corrected. I just helped organize the pieces. That's what I mean. You see what needs doing and find ways to make it happen. Josephine paused. Have you ever considered running for territorial legislature? Clara laughed. Women can't vote, much less hold office. Not yet, but Wyoming's been discussing it. We could be first. Let's focus on what we can do now, Clara said practically. Speaking of which, Elizabeth's been asking about learning to read, and she's young, but bright as a new penny, I've noticed. Bring her by after school tomorrow. We'll see what she's ready for. Elizabeth took to letters like a duck to water. By 5, she was reading simple books and teaching Margaret her ABCs. Elias built them a small desk in the kitchen where they could work while Clara handled the ranch's growing business correspondence. Another letter from the railroad, Clara announced one evening, slitting the envelope. They want to discuss water rights again. Same answer as always, Elias asked from where he was helping Margaret stack blocks. Actually, Clara read further, her expression shifting. This is different. They're offering to buy water, not the land. Annual contract. Good price. Enough to expand the herd. Enough to build that new barn you've been sketching. Maybe even hire a foreman so Jim can finally propose to the widow Martinez. Elias looked up sharply. He told you about that? He didn't have to. Anyone with eyes can see how he moons after her. Clara set the letter aside. But he won't court her properly while he's just a hired hand. Jim's more than that. I know it, you know it, but he needs to know it. A foremanship would give him standing confidence. She moved to the stove, checking the stew. Besides, we could use the help. 2 children and another on the way. Another? Elias was on his feet instantly. Clara, are you? About 3 months along, I think. She smiled at his expression. Martha confirmed it yesterday. He crossed to her, hands gentle on her waist. Another daughter for my army? He will see. Though at this rate, we'll need to build a bigger house. Already sketching that too, he admitted. Figured we'd need it eventually. Optimist, but she was smiling. 10 children. You said, you're the one taking me at my word. That night, after the girls were asleep, they sat on the porch planning. The railroad contract would change things, bring new opportunities and challenges, but they'd weathered worse. No regrets? Elias asked, their old ritual. None, Clara assured him. You. Only that I didn't find you sooner. You found me when we needed each other. That's what matters. The 3rd child was indeed another daughter, Anna, born during a spring thunderstorm that rattled the windows. Elias took it as a sign. Stormborn, he said, cradling her. She'll be fierce like her mother. All our girls are fierce, Clara pointed out, watching Elizabeth teach Margaret to braid grass into rope. They'd have to be out here. The ranch thrived under the new contracts. Jim, promoted to foreman, did indeed court and marry the widow Martinez, bringing her 3 boys into the extended ranch family. Tom took over as head wrangler, while Billy Chen started managing the growing business side under Clara's tutelage. You're building an empire, Martha observed one day, watching Clara juggle correspondence, children, and ranch management. I'm building a legacy, Clara corrected. Something our daughters can inherit and run themselves. If they want to, Elizabeth talks about being a teacher like Miss Hart. Then she'll be the best educated teacher in the territory. Clara signed another contract, this one for supplying beef to the growing town. Options, Martha. I want them to have options. The years rolled by in a blur of growth and change. Elizabeth did indeed show teaching ambitions, helping with the younger students even as she devoured every book she could find. Margaret developed her father's gift with horses, riding before she could properly walk. Anna, the storm-born child, lived up to her birth, wild and laughing, afraid of nothing. Then came Robert, surprising everyone. A boy, Martha announced, beaming. Finally, a son. Elias, who'd been pacing the hall, stopped dead. A boy? Don't sound so shocked, Clara said weakly from the bed. It was bound to happen eventually. I'd gotten used to girls, he admitted, approaching carefully. I know girls. You'll learn boys too. She placed the baby in his arms. Besides, he's got 3 older sisters to keep him in line. Robert was followed 2 years later by James, then William, then Charles. The house, expanded twice, rang with noise from dawn to dark. Clara, far from being overwhelmed, seemed to thrive on the chaos. How do you do it? Alice Gibson asked one day, visiting with her own 2 children. The women had become unlikely friends over the years. Good help, Clara said, watching Sarah Martinez wrangle the younger boys while the girls worked on their lessons. And remembering that they won't be small forever. Sometimes that's a comfort, sometimes a terror. Alice laughed. The school had expanded too, now boasting 3 teachers and students from across the valley. Elizabeth, at 16, assisted Miss Hart with the younger children while preparing for her own teacher certification. She could go to college, Miss Hart told Clara. Back east. She's brilliant enough. I've offered. She says everything she needs to learn is here. Clara watched her eldest daughter patiently explaining sums to a group of 6-year-olds. I won't force her to leave if she doesn't want to. You've raised them to know their own minds. That was the idea, Clara smiled. Though sometimes I wonder if we did too good a job. Yesterday, Anna informed me she's going to be a cattle baron, her words, and Margaret wants to start a horse breeding program. And the boys? Too young to tell, though Robert seems fascinated by the ledgers. Sits beside me while I work, asking questions about numbers. The 10th child, because of course there was a 10th. Elias's prophecy made manifest, arrived on a clear autumn day when the aspens were golden. Another daughter, to Elias's delight and Clara's amusement. We'll call her Faith, Clara declared, because it took faith to believe we'd actually make it to 10. 10 children, Elias marveled, looking around the expanded dining room where their brood gathered for meals. I was joking when I said that. I wasn't, Clara replied serenely, though I think Faith might be our last. You said that after Charles. I was younger then, now. She touched the gray beginning to show in her hair. Now I think it's time to focus on raising them rather than having them. The ranch had become almost a small town itself. Jim and Sarah's boys worked alongside the Boone children. Tom had married and built a cabin on the north section. Billy Chen brought his bride from San Francisco, adding to the growing community. Remember when it was just us? Elias asked one evening. They'd escaped to the porch while the older children supervised the younger at bath time. Barely, Clara leaned into him. Seems like another lifetime. Any regrets now? She considered 10 children, from Elizabeth down to baby Faith. A ranch that had tripled in size, a community they'd helped build from suspicious neighbors into real allies. A life constructed from determination and partnership. No, she said finally, and no regrets. You? Only one. She looked up, surprised. What? I should have asked for 12 children. 10 doesn't seem like quite enough anymore. She hit him with her knitting. Elias Boone. Joking. He caught her hands, laughing. 10 is perfect. You're perfect. This life we've built is perfect. Perfectly chaotic, she corrected, as a crash came from inside, followed by guilty giggles. Perfectly ours, he countered. Inside, Elizabeth's voice rose in fond exasperation, managing her siblings with inherited steel. Soon she'd be married herself. The blacksmith's son had been courting carefully, and the cycle would continue. 10 sons, you said, Clara murmured. I gave you 7 daughters instead. And 3 sons. But the daughters. Elias smiled. The daughters are the real treasure, each one with their mother's strength and their father's stubbornness. A powerful combination. The sons set over their empire, for empire it was, built not just of land and cattle, but of children and community, connections and shared dreams. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Children to guide into adulthood, a ranch to run, a community to serve. But tonight, surrounded by the controlled chaos of their creation, Clara and Elias sat together as they had that first night. Partners in truth, in work, in love, in the beautiful, impossible dream of family. I love you, Clara said, words worn smooth by years of use but no less true. I love you too, Elias replied, my strong woman. Inside, Faith began crying, and Anna's voice rose, offering comfort. Elizabeth called for more towels. Robert and James argued over a toy, and Margaret tried to keep peace. It was loud, messy, imperfect, and absolutely everything they'd never known they wanted. It was home,